Hello, guys. I am Shane Davis, 20-year comic book veteran. I wish this video was a better subject than what it's going to be. And I've been thinking about it a lot today and kind of wanted to do a video on it. Peter David passed away at 68, which is really tragic. That's the thing with the American comic book industry. It's usually full of sad stories. Unfortunately, either creators suing or in legal battles for rights, health problems, destitute, no work from the mainstream that they added so much to, things like that. A lot of financial problems, usually later in life, for varying reasons. I only get into it too much, but Peter David passed away, 68 years old. Obviously, he had a historic run on Hulk, pretty much a smart Hulk that you guys see in the MCU, kind of, mainly inspired by him. His historic run with Dale Keown, great comics, Spider-Man 2099, one of the few 2099 books I actually enjoyed as a kid. I would pick up Doom 2099, X-Men 2099, but Spider-Man 2099, really the only character that stuck out of that whole, whatever you want to call it, imprint. Character was a big thing in the last Spider-Verse movie. Toys, I'm sure you guys have seen. Everybody probably knows who Spider-Man 2099 is. Had a big run on Aquaman, which inspired the character and kind of, put the character in what you guys come to expect out of Aquaman today. A lot of people love that run. Aquaman lost his hand in that run and stuff like that. Had the hook hand, all that, from my understanding, unless I'm mixing that up. But he wrote a lot of great stuff. X Factor, strong guy, which was a big kind of like fan favorite X-Men character at the time. He kind of came up with that character. That again was a very classic X Factor run that people kind of reference back to, with Larry Stroman, really great. But he also did a lot of things like worked on Star Trek novels, which my dad, I'm not a big Star Trek fan, but my dad loved those Star Trek novels, read a lot of them. And from my understanding, it was quite a few he wrote. So Peter David was kind of like I guess, as far as writing goes, a jack of all trades. He worked in TV also. He worked on Young Justice. Looks like he even worked on Ben 10, which I had no idea he worked on that. One of the few writers besides JMS who ever worked on Babylon 5. Now, it's sad when somebody dies, and especially it's sad when somebody's so acclaimed and talented as a writer. I never had the chance to work with him. It didn't come to light. There was a proposal that me and him were going to work together on an Avengers miniseries type spinoff. I think it was going to be Wonder Man, but maybe some other cameos of Avengers in there, and it just didn't come to light. Contract happened at DC Comics, Marvel. It just didn't pan out. I did meet him later on at cons or a free comic book day signing, I think. I met him a couple of times. A really nice guy. As far as I could tell. There's a couple of tragedies here, and I want to kind of go through. To me, he represented a old guard of comics when comics weren't so preachy, when they weren't so political, when they were fun storytelling devices, okay? And through that, he actually brought new things to the table also, which is kind of something that I don't feel like we don't get a lot in comics today. Spider-Man 2099, really a lot of people like this book. I enjoyed it as a kid, but also ups like Maestro, right? The idea that if Smart Hulk existed and he never reverted back to being dumb Hulk, that he could become this supervillain that would destroy the MCU, and this unstoppable force. And the Smart Hulk that we ended up in the later MCU, I don't even know if we would have ever gotten that without Peter David. I don't know if we would have ever had that angle of the Banner Hulk type thing. And it pains me that, one, we're losing talent like that, and was it Marvel even utilizing this talent, like they should have been? I'm going to say no. I'm not keeping up with every book he was doing, but I kind of get the feeling no. I think he had a few gigs here or there, But Peter David was in the last days running out of insurance, losing Medicaid, and needs your help running GoFundMe's to cover expenses. His wife was. And I feel like the Peter David thing is sort of a cautionary tale. And I felt this in my career at certain times. And you would see me when I was working at Marvel and DC pivot and go work at Legendary to get more investments in comic projects. I would get paid out if it became TV, movies, or video games, or even going to Image and doing my own creator owned book there. And now today doing crowdfunding at Nine Lives Comics, our own shop. And you guys can go sign up for my next big book, Anatomic. But one of the things that eventually hits you in the stomach as a my generation of comic creator is there is a very dark end of the road if you continue to stay working in mainstream comics, if you're working for corporate companies like Marvel and DC, if you go your whole career and never invest in yourself. And now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that you're going to go invest in yourself and have big successful comics. It doesn't really mean that at all. But when I look around at what Peter David did at Marvel, especially with say like Spider-Man 2099, who really didn't have a lot to do with Spider-Man at all. That could have just been his own creation in my sense. I think you could have, outside of the name Spider-Man, there's really not much there. It's not Peter Parker. His abilities were different. And I'll even say he even kind of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. I'm not even sure if that movie they pulled from Spider-Man 2099 because he had hooks that would come out of his fingertips. That had never been done in Spider-Man before. And he had a major influence on like even those movies. I feel like at least the first movie that they pulled from that. I mean, the guy had a big footprint and left a big footprint in pop culture. He might not be the biggest name today in lights that people recognize, but my generation recognize who Peter David is because he was writing fun comics. But did Peter David invest in himself enough in his career? I don't know. I'm not the biggest guy on everything he's ever done, but this is the thing with creators today. You look at this, you see a guy having to raise money for medical expenses who did so much, who has characters he created, in Spider-Verse movies and stuff like that. Toys that you're walking through Walmart or Target and you see his characters. And you have to ask yourself, like, really, what's in it for you if you dedicate most of your livelihood, your life, the better years of your life, working for corporate comics? And I remember there being a rivalry between Todd McFarlane and Peter David in the 90s, roughly. I was a kid, so I don't remember the ins and outs. And this rivalry, I guess there was no internet back then, so maybe it was in comic magazines and stuff. So or you had to be at a comic panel that they were at. You guys can look it up on your free time. There was a fork in the road there at a certain time, and you see Todd McFarlane leave and go and do Spawn and stuff. And I'm only using him as a reference point because of their rivalry. But it starts to make you think, was there a time to jump off of working on other people's IPs and do your own? And would Peter David even be in this situation, right? There's multiple articles here on Bleeding Cool about Peter David running out of money and stuff and doing crowdfunding just to raise for health. I mean, where's Marvel at in this? Do they feel they don't need to donate money? I mean, maybe it's a legal nightmare if Marvel hands over money or thank you checks to a creator with health problems because then they need to do it for everybody. But I mean, obviously, I don't know if Marvel Comics felt indebted to Peter David or DC Comics felt indebted to him for what he had given them with characters. I mean, Marvel historically has a horrible equity payout deal with these characters. And one of the loopholes is if the character is derivative of another character or keeps a name, like say Spider-Man 2099, then they don't owe you anything because it's somehow tethered to an already existing character, right? Even though you make a completely new character in the case of his version of Hulk, here, Maestro, or say Spider-Man 2099. And this is nothing but corporate greed. It really isn't going to break Mickey Mouse's back or, Spider Man's back for Marvel to have been more generous in cutting off a piece of, the profits of these characters whenever they make a toy or whenever they make movie appearances. And there's still even Reddit articles saying that maybe this version of Hulk will become in the MCU. I kind of wonder at some point in time, is the comic book industry ever going to reevaluate the work for hire agreements that were, forged back when comics were only newsstand items, that they were only there for 30 days and then they were ripped up, that there was no transmedia applications to these characters. That was crazy talk to think that that could be a movie one day or something. Today, you can basically go make a character at Marvel Comics, and if it's popular enough, it maybe in a year or less, it's either on TV, a video game, or a movie. Maybe even less time for an action figure. I mean, in about a year's time, anything you create at Marvel Comics today can be sold as multiple products of entertainment, and you're owed nothing. I don't know. I mean, it's so sad to see a comic creator that did so much need his wife to go look for money for medical expenses. And look, I mean, there will not be a comic book union. The industry's too weak. And in the end, only thing Marvel and DC has to do is shoot steroids into the page rate of a few key members of that union, and they bust it up. We've seen articles from Dustin Nguyen, who I did a video on, talking about things have got to change at the big two. I don't know if this will trigger that type of conversation. I doubt it. A lot of people will just be in shock of this whole situation, but the conversation's been floating out there by certain creators. And it makes me think about Neil Adams in a way. Neil Adams took a big stand in the American comic book industry to argue that Jack Kirby get his original artwork back. But the only reason Neil Adams could take that argument to the mat is because he didn't fear of losing work from Marvel or DC, because he had his studio set up where he was already doing like TV work and animation work or storyboard work. And the name of the studio is escaping me. It's at the tip of my tongue. But it reminds me of that the only guy that could make a difference and get creators the original artwork back, that the companies didn't need to keep it or incinerate it or give it away or whatever, ending up on like the black market, basically, in some cases, was a guy that didn't need the money anymore, but had the clout and had the leverage and had the voice. And I just don't know if there's another one of those guys that can really make a difference in the American comic book industry like Neil Adams did, that was that influential. Todd McFarlane's already said what he had to say when he went and left, and he's never really returned back to Marvel and DC again. I mean, there is nobody that can leverage that again, and that's one thing missing right now in the American comic book industry. And I don't know, I'm kind of left perplexed with the stagnant books we get, the lack of new characters. But I understand why there's a lack of cool new characters in American comics anymore at Marvel and DC, and it's because you're not going to get anything for it. And it's probably the biggest thing hurting the American comic book industry right now that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to have an open conversation about why are comics at Marvel and DC do today so damn boring. And that even if the character does come around that people say catch on, like Punchline, right? The character's design looks so goddamn boring. I mean, nobody even cares about that character anymore. It was just false built up hype on like a lukewarm concept of a character, another Joker girl sidekick with a funny name. I don't blame the creators that the character is so hollow and, there's nothing in that character, because you're probably getting fucked over by the company for giving them that character. Historically, DC Comics is better at treating creators well. Paul Levitz, when he was at DC Comics, his job was, he had this legacy title or something like that. And basically, Paul's job was to make sure some of these creators in their twilight years would get a nice payday sometime or be taken care of, especially if they were pulling stuff for movies. You know, in the case of Neil Adams, he gave him Batman Odyssey, and I know that page rate he got, and guys, it was through the roof. It was so much money that I don't want to talk about the deal, but per se the dollar, but they were afraid to cut him checks for batches of 5, so they were like, you only get paid at the end of one issue because you're getting paid that much per page, that we, at least when we cut a check for this, we want an entire book we can go to press with in case you get that money and you just stop drawing. And that type of taking care of creators that did so much for the American comic book industry, I just don't know if that's there anymore. I'm kind of torn between it, because I feel like it's necessary, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of creators need to wake up and make sure that their best ideas are their ideas, not Marvel and DC Comics. And I don't know, this is kind of like to me, a little sobering, I guess. Sometimes I doubt, like, did I make the right move when I decided not to work for Marvel and DC for the rest of my life? And then I see things like this and I'm like, probably, yeah, probably I did. Because I have a little bit more control over my future. I'm never waiting on a script, I'm not knocking on the door. I'm not being priced out, you know, of getting another comic book gig. I mean, the freelance life is either feast or famine. I mean, it really is. You're either looking for work or got too much work to do in a shitty deadline. Just that's the way comics runs, right? So anyways, if you guys will hit like, subscribe, ring the bell for notification. Let me know in the comments below what was some of your favorite Peter David comics. You know, because there's a lot of good ones out there. And I've recently been cracking into the Hulk Omnibus and that Marvel's been releasing. So those are out there if you guys are wanting to explore Peter David's work. A lot of good things have been said about his Aquaman run. You know, Spider-Man 2099 might not be for everybody, but he did have a really good Hulk run. Guys, if you haven't, please go sign up for Anatomic. This will be our next book launching at 9 Lives Comics. I'll leave you guys with the trailer for this smash hit comic coming at you from our company. Take care. See you later. Bye.
If fighting was a god, I would worship him. I would bow to him. I would pray for victory. For he only grants opportunities. But behind every god lurks a devil. And the devil wants me to take a dive. My name is Anatomic. And this is how my legend was made.